Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. I'm Thomas.
I'm Julie.
And this is part 2 of last week's Q&A about pornography and the solo intimacy debate. And so we've got a few more questions that were left over from last week that we wanted to still talk about and discuss. So we're just going to dive right in and get to it, just like last time.
Yeah, we did 3 last week, so if you haven't listened to the episode, go check that out. 3 questions, and we have 3 more this time.
Yeah, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on all social media. That's all going to be linked down in the description. But let's take a look at it. The first question for this episode is, does adult content skew expectations of sex with your spouse?
Drum roll.
What's your answer?
Yes.
I would agree.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. I think it damages or even destroys the attraction to your spouse, because you can learn to respond to another picture, video, a device, and not the person that you married.
Well, and I think that there are things that your spouse can't do that the professionals,
quote unquote,
can do.
Yeah.
I think, and if you are continuously exposing yourself to that, then you're going to have this skewed expectation of what sex should be like with your spouse, and then when you're going to be putting pressure on them to do certain things, and if they can't perform, that's going to, one, disappoint you, disappoint them, push you right back to going back to solo. And I think it really does drastically skew expectations more than anybody might think. I mean, we talked last week about it, not being harmless, and I think this is just another example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question is, the presence of adult media in a marriage build a bridge or create a wall?
Well, for me, I don't think that it builds a bridge in any scenario. I think that that's a hopeful thought for anyone who's trying to introduce that into their marriage.
So I think that question comes from somebody who's thinking like, this will help spice up our marriage. Maybe if we do it together. It's not, maybe they're thinking of a solo act. Maybe they know that's wrong. I'm not going to turn to pornography or do this alone. But what if we introduce it into the marriage bed of something we do together? And I don't see why that would build a bridge. A bridge is something you use that term to like repair something and get closer. And just for even the reasons you said from the first question, I think it skews the expectations or even the comfortability of that. You're inviting other people into your marriage. Like, absolute wall for me is my answer.
Totally. I think that there's like I said, it's a hopeful thing, and I think there's another scenario in which if, there's a pornography addiction with one spouse, I think there could be a hopeful side from the other spouse of trying to reel them back in. Well, maybe if I just allow it to where we do it together, then it will be less bad, or they'll still be attracted to me, or whatever, name your feeling or scenario around that. But I could see how that could be a skewed mindset of, maybe this will build the bridge. Maybe if I, stop having that wall up and I partake in it as well, maybe that will spice things back up or re-spark the intimacy between the husband and wife. And I really don't think it would. I think that's a skewed sense of hope, that if you introduce that together, you're going to have all those negative side effects that you weren't planning on, and it's going to be more detrimental in the long run, I think. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, last week episode, the Bible verse that we had talked about, self-control. And if you didn't have self-control, then you were kind of giving an open door to the devil. And I just, picture that analogy with this, an open door to pornography, even if it's agreed upon in the marriage bed, that's an open door to the devil. I don't want to sleep with the devil. I don't want the devil sleeping between us. That's where it's just this fantasy world, but that's I can picture this creepy devil coming into a marriage, and that's why I was that's a complete wall between us, not a bridge to spice up our intimacy.
Yeah, and I think that it additionally for couples who have a spouse that travels for work or something like that, I think that even introducing it to your marriage together will make it assumed that it's okay to partake in when you're apart.
Yeah.
And I think that's just another small scenario of it. And, or maybe it's someone says, okay, you can do that because I know at least if you're doing that, you're not having an affair with someone else. But what if you introduce it together and then they still do that, or it opens the door? I mean, we talked about that, what you just said about if you give an open door to the devil, what other things are going to walk through that door? I mean, or I think he's going to rip it off the hinges, right? I mean, there's not going to be really a way to close it or turn back from it, so you have to really close that door before it gets opened.
Yeah, so I think the Bible verse for this week actually fits in here before we move on to the third question, because Matthew 5:28 says, "But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart."
Yeah.
Insert male, female.
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying. You're looking at something else, someone else. If you're fantasizing over it, introducing these things, you've already committed adultery in your heart.
Right.
So why would that be allowed?
Yeah, and we also talked about it from a solo intimacy standpoint last week, that if you're training yourself to where you can only perform with that, that's going to be a problem. If you introduce this in your marriage, you're going to get to a point where you can only perform with that, and you have to be careful around that. And I think last week's Bible verse talking about the part of don't what's the word I'm looking for? Don't withhold from each other unless it's agreed upon for a period of time. And so if that's the case, then and you can't perform without that, then you have to find a way to break that up. I'm not don't hear the wrong thing here. I'm not condoning that, but as we get into our next question, you're going to hear how this makes a little more sense. Because if you're introducing something new or different or trying to spice up your intimacy, that's okay. I think that the pornography, the adult content, viewing content is probably a line most people or all marriages should not cross. But I think that if you're going to introduce something, you also have to be able to still come together without that. So that way you can still share that love for one another, and still be able to perform without that.
Yeah, there's actually scientific studies out there that you're reshaping your brain to use the word perform, so to perform to that device. So, I would even go as far as say that type of media. So if pornography started with magazines or pictures in print, and now we all carry around a cell phone, that's what's scary for the our kids' generation growing up with devices and all the protections we have to put on and talk to them about of what could pop up, because it's I don't want any wiring of their brain of
Yeah.
like, I need this device, I'm gravitating toward this. And so even that, the forms of media changed. It's like so easy to have that in your hand, and be exposed to that. And so the studies are that, you can then start like responding to that type of media, to that device, and it will wear down your ability to respond to a human, like your own spouse in human form that you can touch and feel, but your brain has rewired to respond to this device.
And additionally to that, your brain will stop responding to certain things of that device at some point, and you'll have to increase what you're viewing and what you're searching for. And that's why these fantasies get so strange and out there, of like, you have to find something that's even more different than what you've watched before, so that you can perform or have that dopamine rush. And if it always has to get more severe or stronger what you're viewing, then that's going to create a real problem. Now, I do have a question. Let's go off notes here for a second. What's your view around like spicy texts, pictures back and forth in a marriage? So like self images, not like sending images of other people, because this is kind of like a gray area, right, of what we're talking about. So what's your view?
So this isn't an endorsement, but there are apps out there. So if you want the info, you can reach out, because there's one that we have used that like blurred the picture of the text message, like it was just spouse to spouse. It wasn't to like, oops, I sent that to the wrong person. And so we allowed that in our marriage because it was each other. But I want to be clear that that wasn't to then be turned on for a solo act and a release like pornography could lead to.
Right.
It was like thinking of you, get excited for when we're like coming together. And that's the level of like spice up your marriage,
right?
Fun text, or we might have an emoji like that people don't know, that's like our little sign of like, hey, thinking of you. But I think that is why, like, if you want tools for connections for your spouse, but not to then like still do it alone.
I think that you answered that flawlessly. I wasn't quizzing you. I just think that I couldn't add anything to make that better. I think that was perfectly on point. I think using it, again, like I said before, as a tool, introducing something as a tool, not something to be dependent on, but as a tool. And we talked about this last week's episode, about how women sometimes need a little more time in advance. Women think about it less during the day. But if that's something that you could maybe add into your marriage, where it's like, hey, thinking about you, whether that's pictures or, like you said,
emoji,
a special emoji that's just, if it accidentally goes to anybody, then it's
I
not
want to be
be
clear,
a big
it
deal,
is not the like inappropriate emojis that are like the typical things. Like if you saw it in our text messages, if the kids saw it, they actually wouldn't know. Like, it's not the eggplant or the peach or whatever those things are. I can't even like keep up. So even if it's as simple as that, that's like, you've picked this emoji that it's not an inappropriate picture, but it's just like those fun things to spice up your marriage. Again, saying, hey, I'm like feeling this, but it's for you.
Right.
And it's, I will wait and give my body to you when we're together.
Yeah. Let's continue on this for a second. I do want to go ahead and plug that app real quick.
Okay.
It's the Intimately Us app. And we'll add a link in our description of this episode. It's an affiliate link, so you can sign up for their app and their pro plan if you choose to. But basically, the cool thing about that app is that when you each download it, you get a special code that only the other person can get, and it can only connect to one other app. So it's not like you can send your code to a bunch of different people and, work around it that way. It's designed specifically for married couples to connect to each other.
And it's more than just pictures. There's questions.
There's a lot more to the app. There are the same brand, makes a few different apps, so you can definitely check them out. But we'll leave the link in the description for this specific app, so you can go check that out and see if that is something that can benefit you and your marriage. But let's continue kind of on this path before we still get to the next question, a little off script. Let's talk about
3 questions.
I know, but there's more questions coming to mind, so I think it's good stuff. While we're going down this trail, talking about the spicy pictures going back and forth, what about, like we talked about a little while ago, work trips? How do you handle that if you're already introducing pictures going back and forth? I mean, I think there are 2 options here. Either you choose, that's your time apart, time to withhold from each other, so to speak, and build up that kind of tension for when you reunite. That's one avenue. The other avenue is making it not a solo intimacy act, but still reconnecting via video chat or something later and having fun that way, where again, it's not a solo intimacy act, but you're bringing each other into it. So I think that that's a little bit of another gray area of, you don't want to train yourself to only be able to interact with a screen. But again, if you're in the habit of consistently having intimacy with your spouse at home, then that, one work trip or that longer work trip is not necessarily, I don't think, going to send you down a dark path if you're using that screen with each other, on the other end, not introducing like a third party like porn, or anything like that while you're partaking. But I think that that's another gray area. Personally, I think that that's okay if you agree on it, if everybody feels comfortable with it. I think that's a gray area that people could walk away. If we didn't discuss it, people would be like, well, they didn't talk about, my husband or wife travels all the time. How do we, connect while we're apart? And so I think that that's something you have to discuss. I mean, a lot of our podcast episodes will circle back to communication. I think that's something that you have to discuss and say, okay, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to, what's our limit? What are we okay with? And I think this is a good segue into kind of our next question as well. Does the use of toys or adult content enhance a marriage bed or introduce an invisible third party? And I think we already kind of talked about the adult content side. I think we would agree that.
So then let's just say toys, use of toys or whatever you want to call that. And would they enhance the marriage bed? Or I think we can't answer that for couples. I think that's a question that has to go back to the audience, and not the audience, but the in the marriage bed. Only that husband and wife can answer that question for their marriage, because there's so much. We drew the line and said no to outside pictures, videos, whatever images. As far as the use of, so I don't want to use the word device because I use that as like a phone. So toys, we'll stick with that. I really think that that's just something we can't say a firm yes or no, because it's not a firm no. For us, I think I can speak for both of us, but we can't say yes, that would save your marriage, because that's a special conversation between a husband and wife to know what are they comfortable with.
Sure.
And only they can answer that.
Yeah, because there are so many different options out there of what you could use and things like that. And, there are very opposite ends of this spectrum of like toys and, like I said, like you said, I don't think device is the right word, but, lingerie is another thing that can be introduced that's not a toy, but something that can be used as
helpful spark.
Yeah, helpful spark to keep things spicy. But
I mean, I brought up lube last week. So
right,
where do you draw the line if you're saying lingerie, lube, toys?
Exactly, and I think there are other end of the spectrum toys that you won't probably find, like dolls and things like that you will not find on our partner's website. Romantic Blessings.
Yeah.
That's our partner in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, like, restraint. I guess I was, like, thinking of all these, like, but no, I guess, again, it's a conversation between your husband and wife, but you can go really, really far and get really, just wrong.
Close to the line of stepping outside your marriage.
Yeah.
So, but, there are lots of things that people could be into, and they have a very big selection. And if you're looking for a spot that is safe to go look at that with your spouse, I mean, if you go into an adult store, like an actual physical store, you're not going to find like that safe place to like view things with your spouse. That's basically introducing the images and porn and everything else. But these guys make it a no nudity environment. They have actually like educational material that's very tasteful if you're looking to introduce something into your intimacy with your spouse. Like, they have lots of things that can help you outside of just the toys and objects that you can use.
And I would suggest that people look at Romantic Blessings. So romanticblessing.com.
Yeah, and we'll leave an affiliate link in our description of the episode so that you can click that and get a discount for anything that you buy with them. But check that link out.
I was encouraging them to do it together. I was just making sure I had the website right, because it's just like a known link that I click on. But that you look at it together. So again, one's not like, even though there's no nudity, one's not like fantasizing over like, ooh, this would be nice, and like comes orders something and surprises and expects to introduce that.
Right.
Like, again, the level of comfortability, the discussion, the preferences, I feel like that would be a safe thing that you can do together and discuss it. If it's like, weird, I've never talked about that, I don't know, well, like, it's safe to scroll and look and spark those conversations.
Yeah, and I would agree, definitely looking at it together the first time or the first few times is great, because then you can establish those boundaries. But then you may be able to look by yourself and surprise them with something that's within those boundaries that you've discussed. If you step outside those boundaries, that's going to start putting that pressure on them. So if there's something that, you see that it's like, hey, this might be interesting, you'd have to go back and discuss that again. See if your boundaries need to change, if that fits within, if that, is comfortable to your spouse, things like that. But make sure that you have that discussion, look together the first few times, see what you're both interested in, and then go from there. But to kind of get back to the question here, does the use of this enhance it or introduce an invisible third party? I think, just to reiterate, you have to decide that on your own. I think if you use it as a tool together and figure out your boundaries, I think it can enhance your intimacy level. I think that there's a before and after discussion too. I think if you try something and you're like, oh man, I really did not like that, that's going to quickly turn into an invisible third party if one spouse doesn't like it. So you have to talk about that and be okay with, like, okay, we tried it, not the right thing, so let's move on. Let's try something different. That's okay. The communication is what's going to prevent this from becoming an invisible third party. And the continuous communication, not just the one time, not just the upfront communication, but the continuous communication where you circle back and revisit to make sure everyone's still on the same page and comfortable with it.
Yeah.
You agree?
I agree.
Awesome. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. If you listen to this whole episode and didn't take our advice in the beginning and go back, haven't already gone back and listened to last week's episode, go do that. What are you waiting for? You should have done that first. But nevertheless, thanks for being here. Make sure you follow us on all the social media and subscribe to the podcast so that you can get updates when a new episode launches. And we look forward to having you back next week, where together we'll work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time.